Yes, fantastic. Thank you for having me as well. My name is Mark Swindles. I am a tour operator in the Northern Territory. I am part owner of two businesses, Uluru Camel Tours and Uluru Segway Tours, located down in Yalara in the bottom part of the Northern Territory, close to Uluru, of course. I'm representing myself, not my business partners today or my organisation, but as a tour operator and a Territorian.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Firstly, I'd like to sort of introduce myself and give you a bit of a background. Firstly, I just told a little fib. I'm not a Territorian. I will be next year. I've been in the Territory since 1993, and next year will be my 25th year, and officially I will be a Territorian, and I'm planning to have a bit of a party there, actually. It's quite a milestone. But originally, I came to the Territory in 1993 for the reasons that I still think many people come to the Territory, and that was for the adventure, the wide open spaces, the nature. And I came out here and I bought 4 wild camels, and for several years I travelled through Central Australia with my little band of camels, living quite a nomadic lifestyle. And my trips got more and more adventurous, and in 1999 I crossed this country from west to east on a 9-month camel trek and arrived at Byron Bay for New Year's Eve 2000. And when you travel like that, you travel at a very slow pace, and you travel quite a nomadic lifestyle, and you find things in nature that most people would probably miss. And one of the things I did notice was the legacy of mining and what it had left on the earth, and especially in the Northern Territory, which is where my heart belongs. And as you were travelling through the desert, often, especially in the Gibson and Simpson sides of the Northern Territory, you would see seismic lines. I'm not sure if people are aware what a seismic line is, but sometimes they can be hundreds of kilometres long, other times not so much. Sometimes they're in a patchwork sort of system, and pretty much a mining company gets a bulldozer and in a very straight line drives their bulldozer across the earth. And some of the seismic lines I have experienced out there, I presume, are from the 1960s and 1970s. And I don't know how long it takes for a seismic line to disappear back into nature, but obviously 40 years is still not enough. And these seismic lines are quite amazing, actually, because if there is a hill or a mountain in the way, some of the our oldest mountains in the world, those bulldozer drivers must have had amazing courage, because they would just cut a scar up and over and onto the other side. And they are in a straight line. No tree or river or creek is spared. The other thing that I noticed while I was out there was water running freely where it shouldn't. And this is once again a legacy from mining companies. And we have 2 water sources underground in Central Australia, artesian and sub-artesian. Of course, it's the artesian water that will come up if it's allowed to and spill onto the ground. And in the 90s, there was a great effort, especially in the Simpson Desert region, to cap all of these bores that were bringing up water in large amounts, because we were told that the Great Artesian Basin was being lowered, and any water that was being wasted and didn't have a reason to be on the surface was actually lowering the water table. And I did notice that, and I've also noticed over a long time and a long period through taxpayers' money, most of these bores have now been capped, because we know that the underground water is very precious, especially to desert people like ourselves in Central Australia. Then as I travelled in 1999, I finally reached Queensland, and it was quite a shock, actually, because for the first time in my life I came across fracking and pipelines and water spilling onto the ground. And this was very fresh. It was happening then and there. I haven't been back to Queensland till recently, which was earlier this year, and I travelled through some of those regions, and I was quite shocked and staggered how fracking has, in those sort of 17 years, how it has really opened up, taken over the country, and become quite an obvious sight on the landscape. But eventually, I started collecting camels, and I had so many camels I had to start a business. And that's quite a long story, but currently with my two business partners, we employ 30 people at Yalara, around 30 people, and I also have about 50 camels as well. And I love tourism. It's a wonderful business. I'm very proud of my backyard, very passionate about my backyard. And I think, the place that we live, Yalara, is a beautiful place to live. We're actually the 9th largest town in the Northern Territory, with a population of 1,000 people. And the town is 100% tourism. If it wasn't for tourism, it wouldn't be there. We have our amazing rock in our backyard, Uluru. And when you look at the figures with tourism, it's quite staggering in the Northern Territory. 4 to 5 times our population of people come and actually visit the Northern Territory on a holiday, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. It's a huge industry. It's a big industry. It's an industry that certainly needs protection. And the reason it does need protection, especially environmentally, is for the reasons why people make the trip out to the Northern Territory, why they fly at great expense, or why they drive at great expense and great time to actually, spend in a car to actually get here. Why do people come all the way out to the Northern Territory to visit? Well, I can tell you what they're not coming for. They're not coming for the shopping. They're not coming for the nightlife. They definitely aren't coming for our beaches. And they're not coming to ski. They're coming to experience nature. They're coming to experience something that is quite rare these days, which is nature in its purest form, untouched by man. Wildlife. People come for the isolation, for the loneliness, the great expanses. They come to drive our amazing roads. And I think the gas industry and fracking could actually deter people from actually coming. If you're coming for the natural beauty, unfortunately, I think something as industrial as gas mining will turn people away in their droves. We have a certain image in the Northern Territory, and that is of this wild landscape, either at the top end or down here in the south, the desert landscape. And people like it that they can drive for sometimes hours without seeing any infrastructure or any people. It's why they actually come here. And I think if that does change, it'll be quite detrimental to tourism in the Northern Territory. We're seeing. I meet people from all around the world. It's one of the privileges of my job, and Yalara is quite an expensive destination to get to. It's not really what you call a backpacker destination, even though we do get backpackers. It's more upper middle class people coming, and a lot of our guests are quite intelligent people, and one of the things that I often say is, especially with my business, is the thing that ties people together is they've probably got a degree at some point in their life. They're professional people that come out. And we also get a lot of Australians, and this year has been a wonderful year in tourism, and for many reasons, it's probably been the best year since the year 2000, the Olympic years. But we're seeing a lot more Australians travelling in their backyard, and there's reasons for that. Australia, once again, is a safe destination, but as the Australian dollar drops, it becomes more expensive to travel overseas, and people are seeing their own country. And in tourism, a lot of our guests drive to Central Australia, and they take many weeks off, annual holidays. They bundle their kids in the car. They're often pensioners doing this dream trip around their own country. And there's a bit of a circuit, and they travel on the outside of the Simpson Desert through 4 states: Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Northern Territory, and back up through Queensland. So there's a bit of a loop, and they can go either way. And we're actually starting to hear, mainly Australians who are doing these longer trips, that it's so nice to be in the Northern Territory where there's no fracking. People are taking it on board. They're quite confronted by it, especially as they go through Queensland. It seems to be having quite an impact, and they're just commonly referring to the Northern Territory that it's wonderful that it hasn't happened to the Territory, and it's still a great place to go to experience the bounty of natural beauty that we actually have in the Northern Territory. So this is happening more and more so, and that does concern me. My ears prick up every time I actually hear that. And fracking, is happening in vast areas of Queensland, and the gas pipelines are sort of are now a patchwork throughout Queensland, and people do notice it. They certainly do. So I'm quite concerned about that. We also have many other industries besides camel riding in the tourism world of Yulara. The pilots, there's 14 I think currently at the moment that do joy flights in the region around Uluru, Katajuda. One of the most popular ones is flying over the Lake Amadeus Basin to Kings Canyon. That's one of the most popular ones. It's one of the ones the pilots push the most because it's quite a long trip, and they're keen to get their hours up. And I think that would be quite affected actually at the moment. It's really pristine. It's rare to even see a track out there, and you get this really wonderful experience when you fly. It's something I recommend all guests coming to Central Australia do, because what's really impressive. What really impresses people is there's nothing to see. There is nothing. There's no houses or buildings or tracks or roads. It is like it was thousands of years ago. And it's a very impressive sight, and people pay big money to see nothing on the ground. It's just wonderful, stunning beauty, and it's a rarity in this day and age, and it's one of the treasures of the Northern Territory. I think the gas mining, has had a great effect on certain regions in Queensland, but it's also had quite an effect on tourism in other parts of the Northern Territory. It's a hard one to actually to say. It's hard to demonstrate because it hasn't yet happened. But in the cases that it has happened, we can look at impacts that in Darwin, and certainly that had a great effect on Darwin tourism. A detrimental effect on Darwin tourism. There's quite a few articles that are written by Darwin papers. I think even Darwin Council looked into it as well, and it slowed down the Darwin tourism economy quite substantially, to the point that NT Tourism relocated their office from Darwin to Alice Springs for a couple of years there. It was very difficult to get a room in Darwin. The rooms were booked up by mining, construction men and women engineers and surveyors and construction people. It was a massive project, and these people were there to work. They weren't there as tourists, and they didn't go to restaurants, and they didn't go on tours, and they took over the accommodation situation in Darwin, and people knew it was only a flash in the pan, so people didn't go building more accommodation. I suppose if you owned a hotel, it was quite a good time for you, but if you're another tour operator, it was quite a hard time for several years. In fact, from what I understand, some people did close up shop, and it's hard to start up a business in Australia. I'm sure, I'm not. People are aware of that. It's very difficult, and when your business goes down, it's probably hard to start it back up again after. But it's tourism is a great investment. We invest heavily into tourism, and we invest heavily into publicising the Northern Territory, and I certainly feel that when you promote the Northern Territory, you don't see it instantaneously. Often you see it years later. What you do today, you might not see the benefits for many years to come. But certainly there's the downfall as well. If a negative thing happens and people stop going to a location, then it can take many years to build it back up. And that certainly happened in Darwin with the accommodation being taken over by the MPEX construction, and it pushed the prices of rooms up considerably as well. So, as I said, NT Tourism relocated to Central Australia. Why promote something if you can't get people in there? The effect of staffing as well too, with a large gas industry, I think would be challenging for actually a operator in Central Australia. It's very hard to compete with wages, and it is a big issue, staffing in Central Australia. We pay above the award wage. We really try and look after our staff. We have probably better accommodation than probably other camel farms out there. We really try to lift the standard, but at the end of the day, we have seen the effect of mining booms, and in remote areas they will poach your staff, and this has got on forever and a day. Reading a book recently about the gold rush in Melbourne, how sailors left the boats, and people left their job, and people downed tools, and off they went. There was a better opportunity out there, but it did make it very difficult for people to actually run businesses, and I could see the same happening in Central Australia. Of course, miners will always be miners, and as we know, they party pretty hard. There's issues with drugs and violence. There are towns out there that are mining towns still to this day: Kalgoorlie, Laverton, Leonora, Cooper Pedy, Broken Hill, and I don't know if anyone's ever spent time there on a Friday or Saturday night. I'm not a small guy, but on the couple of occasions I have actually had to overnight in those places. I go and sit in my hotel room. I'm not a tourist out there walking the streets. I don't feel safe. Unfortunately, Alice Springs has a bit of an issue these days with the perception that it's a dangerous, violent place, and I don't know how adding hundreds of miners into the mix is actually going to help that situation, especially our elderly travellers, retirees. They like to know that they're safe, and already they're bypassing Alice Springs. They'll camp either side, but we're having there's certainly a big effect there that especially with elderly people, that if they don't feel safe and content to camp, they'll move on. And I think that issue with large numbers of miners, it's an Australia-wide issue. It's always happened and always will happen. When you have wealthy young men who are away from home, and their only entertainment is on a Friday, Saturday night to drink. It does have huge social issues. So I can see, that it will be detrimental to tourism, and certainly, just the look of the raw industrial look of gas fields won't encourage people to come out. I think it will push people away. The other thing I'd like to bring up too is Yulara, as I said before, is the ninth largest town population-wise in the Northern Territory, and we're right in the middle of the Amadeus gas basin there, and I'd really like to make a point that it would be great if the inquiry could come down to Yulara. We've just finished a very busy peak season. It's 950 kilometre round trip for myself to come in here. And considering in Central Australia it's the second largest town, it would be wonderful if the town of Yalara could be included on the list of towns that will be consulted. I think it's very, very important. I think this matter as well too, it all seems to be happening so quickly. We've got a year to make such a momentous decision, and I think too personally, a referendum on a subject like this wouldn't be out of the question. It is a very important subject. A lot of Indigenous people who still aren't aware of what is going on because they live in a region where they have little access to the news. They have no access to newspapers. I've lived on several Aboriginal communities and there is no newspapers for sale. People don't have computers and internet access. So there's a whole group of people that aren't being consulted out there, and I think that's very important that they are consulted because this will have a dramatic effect on their lives, but it's also their country as well. And I think if they're not made aware, especially around the Lake Armadale Basin, you have Docker River and Kalkatjara and Mutijulu. I think these people need to be informed as well, and hence, Yalara is a little bit easier for them to visit than it is Alice Springs. So please consider that, and please, it would be wonderful if you could put us on the list of towns that will be involved in this debate. I think that's come to the end of my input there.
Thank you very much. I understand you drove here today, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
How long did that take Mr. Swindles for you to get here?
I don't want to quite admit to that because I might have been speeding, but
How long would it normally
take?
traveling long?
I think it's 460 kilometres, so it should take about 4 hours plus prescribed breaks as well. So yeah.
Well, I must say the panel's extraordinarily grateful that you have made the effort to come all that way today.
I don't see it as I see it as a very important subject debate, and it was no effort for me to come in. In fact, I dropped what I was doing. As I said, we're in a very busy part of the year, but this is a very important subject. I'm very passionate about the Northern Territory and Central Australia and tourism, and it's my pleasure to come in and be able to give my opinion.
Thank you. And I was very interested to hear about curiously, you're the first person to have actually raised it, as far as I'm aware anyway, the impact on tourism in Darwin, and the fact that, nobody could get actually accommodation, tourists couldn't get accommodation.
Yes, yeah.
That's logical when you say it's logical, but hasn't been raised before, so thank you very much for that. Something to consider. In relation to, did you have to drive through the wells in and around Palm Valley to get here? No.
That's another route that you could drive through. It's a lot longer, and part of the road is dirt. It's called the Mereenie Loop Road, and that's a beautiful drive. Hopefully one day it will be bitumised, but that is one of the jewels of the crown in Central Australia. When you connect up Alice Springs to the West Macdonald Range and Palm Valley and out to Goss's Bluff, and then you come around the back of the West Macdonald Ranges to Kings Canyon, and then you drive down past Mount Connor and on to Uluru and Catajuta. That is on par with probably the Great Ocean Road. It should be one of the most publicised and tourist-promoted drives in Australia. It really is a stunning drive that I can't think of actually a better drive in Australia that takes you past so many iconic landmarks. The only issue is that there's one section that's still quite rough and dirt, and hopefully within the next decade that will finally be bitumised, and that is the jewel of the crown of tourism in Central Australia. And when it's opened up to caravanners and people in two-wheel drive vehicles, it will be a huge boost to NT tourism.
So that's heading out towards Hermansburg, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and so it's taking in Palm Valley, Morini,
Yes.
that area?
Yep.
Because by my, according to the information that we have, there are close to 90 wells in that area, of which 34 have been fracked. So I'm just wondering what sort of impact that has had on tourism in that area.
It's probably quite hidden. I've seen probably a little bit more of it than most people. I think the main area that there's two roads you can take, and I think the most popular one actually steers away from that area. It's I suppose not well publicised because it is out of eyeshot of most people.
Is it out of plane shot as well?
Definitely not, no. There's not as many flights that go over that region. If you fly from Yulara over Kings Canyon, you go out to Goss's Bluff, you will see that, that out there, yep.
Thank you. I should just state now clearly that in terms of a referendum, a number of people have raised, a number of groups and individuals have raised that suggestion. Again, that falls outside our terms of reference. I understand why people are coming forward with that suggestion, but well and truly that is outside our terms of reference.
Okay, yeah, good to know.
It will be up to the government, and I keep saying this, but it will absolutely be up to the government to lift the moratorium or not. We're here to identify the risks.
Yes, yep.
Which we've done, I hope. I'm confident we have. We're now in the process of assessing those risks, and it's that assessment that will form, and subsequent recommendations will form the basis of our final report. I should also state, just to clarify for people who may be concerned, this is, of course, the second time we've come to Alice Springs. We will be back again. There will be another round of consultation in Alice Springs. It won't be the last time people have the opportunity to come in person and present to the panel or engage with the panel in person. And as for your suggestion about Yulara, I'll make some investigations about that. And,
thank you very much.
Think further about that, absolutely.
And we're gathering a petition of names to lobby you as well. We're
not making the decision to lift the moratorium.
No. As far as coming to Yulara,
right. No,
to support, yes.
That's different.
Great,
That's different.
fantastic.
Right. Any further? Yes, Dr. Smith.
Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. I was just trying to follow up on a couple of things that you said.
Sure.
One about in your trek across the country in 1999, and I remember reports of that at the time, so congratulations on achieving that feat. When you said that you got into Queensland and you saw evidence of fracking, whereabouts was that? Was that
I think the Quilpie region through there. I travelled through Birdsville was the first town that I hit in Queensland, so Birdsville, and then Quilpie, and then on to Roma, and then through to Toowoomba. So it's quite a sort of main arterial sort of region that I went through. I tried to staff the roads as much as possible, of course, as you get closer and closer to the east coast. The more you are committed. I actually travelled down a railway for quite a few hundred kilometres as well. It was easier to travel on the side of the Queensland railways and deal with a couple of trains than hundreds of trucks and vehicles every day.
Yeah, sure. And then you said you returned last year. Was that to the same area, or was that?
No, not to similar areas. So I crossed quite a few paths there, but no, I wasn't travelling on camels, and I wasn't able to travel on that exact route. I was towing a caravan at the time.
Yeah, just wondered whether you're in the CSG areas, which of course didn't exist in the late 90s, and whether you were looking at the same industry had expanded, or whether you were looking at the new industry that's come now on your return. I'm just trying to...
The new industry, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks very much.
Sorry, I think was there somebody else down here? Yes, Dr. Anderson and then...
Well, thanks, Mr. Swindles, for your presentation. And I wanted to, well, I guess start off by just making the comment that the interim report fully recognises the importance of the iconic outback landscapes in the NT and the need to protect them and to protect the tourism industry that depends on them. And one of the issues, though, and you noticed this, that most of the tourists, as I guess reflects these iconic landscapes, are sort of either north on the top end, south in the desert, but not so much in the central region, in the Sturt Plateau region, which is the most prospective region for shale gas development. And so I guess my question is, if there were shale gas development in a region like that, and so it wasn't directly impacting Central Australia, to what extent do you think that would still detract from tourism in Central Australia, because tourists have this idea of a broader fracking industry in the NT, even if it's not specifically in Central Australia?
So many of our tourists travel by road, and we have, of course, the Sturt Highway, which cuts Australia in half. And then we have other roads like the Plenty Highway and the Great Central Road and the West and East McDonnell Ranges. They're our sort of main tourist roads, and I think they cover a huge part of Central Australia. Are they proposing that they would only hide the mining, in pockets of land where no one could see it, or is it open to all regions? I would have to query that. I think it's case-by-case basis, but I can't imagine a gas company, if they want to drill for gas because there's gas underground, they will drill if they have the right to do that then and there. It won't be part of their agenda to hide it in some remote corner and only drill in regions where tourists aren't able to see it. I can't see that happening. I imagine once the door is open, they will drill where it's most profitable to drill, not away from the sight of tourists.
Yes, Dr. Beck.
Yes, I appreciate you and your comments about the pristine nature of the territory. You're quite passionate about that. I just want to explore some of the comments that you made in respect of the Amadeus Basin and the gas and oil rigs that are already there, because you mentioned about the iconic nature of the Mereenie Loop, and so that's cutting around those oil and gas wells, and also I think you mentioned that when people were flying over to Kings Canyon, some of those oil and gas wells could be seen. So I'm trying to get, firstly, an assessment of what you think, if any, there has been on tourism because of those oil and gas wells. And secondly, to just acknowledge that with a potential shale gas well, then the number of wells could be an order of magnitude difference. But let's concentrate on your experience.
Sure.
With respect to the facilities that are already here and the impact or otherwise that people perceive attached to those facilities.
Yes, certainly when you fly from Yulara to Kings Canyon, you won't see any facilities. They're further north. If you do the flight to Goss's Bluff, which is then north of Kings Canyon, then you will see the Mereenie oil fields out there. That's certainly the case. I think at the moment, the very small Mereenie gas fields is not hidden. It just happens to be not in an area where you can see it from the ground, or you have to know what you're looking for. I mean, some of the camps are right on the top of hills, on top of our mountains. They're pretty obvious. But it will. It's a small field, and it's hidden accidentally. It's not within eyeshot of major tourist routes. But I think if the Lake Amadeus basin is opened up, then I would think that there would be obviously a lot of infrastructure out there which will be visual. And I presume, and I'm just presuming here, I don't know why I think this, but Yalara, the 9th largest town in the Northern Territory, with a airport and a main road and hotels and bars, will somehow become a little centre for the mining, because we have existing infrastructure there. So I'm only presuming that. Sorry to presume something, but often industries do want to attach themselves to existing infrastructure, and I would imagine our beautiful bitumen road and our airports would be pretty tempting, and petrol stations and service stations, to bring industry in close. If you were going to start somewhere, I would think that would be the place you would start. You have to get your products to the marketplace. So, Yeah,
it's interesting just to hear that those existing infrastructure facilities, I think I'd just like to then characterise them are having minimal, if no, impact upon the tourism industry as they are at the moment. Further development, I think you've indicated that there are potential concerns that you have voiced in terms of a number of issues surrounding visual impact as well as impact on towns.
yes, very much so. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Ritchie.
Mr. Swindles, this is sorry. What I'd just like to put to you, a comment made by Dominic Pecoraro yesterday, and we were talking on similar themes to what we've been talking about now, and he used the phrase the real and perceived problems of the fracking industry, and I think from you're in a hopefully a good position to make an assessment of the effect of the. I'll go back a step. We've discussed the way that Wataka is still an iconic park. It has got kind of gas wells pretty close to it, and that there's no suggestion really that has detracted from the values of Wataka. The subsequent to the Amadeus field being developed, there appears to be a very, very strong negative perception about the fracking industry. Your industry, tourism, perhaps more than any other, deals in people's perception of a place, how they conceive
Very
of
much
a
so, yeah.
destination. So I'd just like you to sort of comment on that. It's I think where we've been trying to get to in these last lot of questions, how much is it about the way people perceive the idea of the industry, and how much is it about, say, losing the visual amenity of a particular a part of a tourist route because of the side of a well or of a pipeline?
Perception's everything in tourism. We, as an industry, we present ourselves with ads throughout the whole world and the whole of Australia. The perception is, and the perception that we give out about the Northern Territory is that it's this beautiful, wild, pristine place, and with stunning landscapes and perfect nature. The perception that we give of the Northern Territory is very, very different to any other tourism brand. The perception is one of the things that we put a lot of emphasis into, and I think you also want to deliver what you perceive as well. I think it can be very detrimental if and I, when I produce brochures or produce ads for our business, I make sure that I don't perceive something that people aren't going to get, because then we'll have complaints. And I'm very careful about that. When I have photographs of my beautiful camel string with Uluru in the background, we're 11 k's away from Uluru, and it's quite easy for the trick of a camera lens to make Uluru look a lot closer to that than what it actually is. So the perception of the Northern Territory is something that we've been in the tourism industry working for generations, not generations, for decades to get a certain image out there, and that's why people come here. I think anything that takes away from that is quite detrimental. People go to Kalgoorlie to see this mining town. That's what they're expecting. They've got that big hole there, the big mine. I think they call it the big hole, and people actually pay to go and have a look at that. That's their image. That's their perspection. But it's not what we're trying to actually promote. We're promoting that there's nothing out there. That's the nice thing. And if you change that, there might be other nice areas for people to go to on their holidays. So people have thousands of choices these days where to go for a holiday. Thousands of choices. It's amazing. More so than ever before, air travel is cheap, and people research their holidays, and it's so easy to go anywhere in the world, and every other destination is competition. People have 4 weeks a year, and we're trying to push our image, push ourselves to the top of their list, and it's not easy. It really isn't easy. And, there's a big world out there, and I think we have to be very careful if we lose the image that we've got and we lose the reason why people are coming here, we'll regret it.
So just to summarise that, it would be the problem of this perception being changed and sort of a negative perception is not solved by having a buffer of 100 metres of trees between the road and the drill pads, because you would say that the authenticity of the perception is then challenged by would be kind of compromised.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Yes, Professor Priestley.
Thank you, Mr. Swindles. You've focused a lot on the visual impacts of the industry on tourism and so on. One of the risks that we've identified that will need mitigation if the industry has to go ahead is the impact of increased traffic, particularly movement of large-scale movement of vehicles with equipment and so on. What impact do you think that would have on the tourism industry, and what sort of steps could be taken to mitigate those risks?
That's a very good question. When I drove in yesterday, it was a slower trip than usual because the roads are very, very heavy. The roads are a lot of traffic, well, what I consider a lot of traffic at the moment. Maybe if you come from Sydney or Melbourne, it's not the case at all. But it was quite slow. There's a lot of elderly people pulling caravans on the highway, hundreds of them, thousands of them. The elderly people, retirees in Australia, they're a bit like nomadic birds. When it becomes cold and chilly down south, they hook their car to their caravan and they start driving north, and they spend quite a bit of time up north fishing and travelling and experiencing the top end. And then as soon as it starts getting humid and the roads get cut off because of the wet, they head south again. I hear a lot from the truck drivers complaining of this time of the year. It's pretty chaotic out there. Road train drivers and elderly people in overloaded caravans don't tend to mix too well. So I would think there would be quite an issue. You might not be aware, but there's great pressure on truck drivers not to drive at night anymore. Some insurance companies won't insure truck drivers to drive at night. It's changing the whole industry because truck drivers do like to drive at night. It's less wear and tear on the vehicles and less traffic out there to deal with, and probably less police as well. But They do like to drive at night, but there's a lot of companies now that won't allow their drivers to drive at night. They've got to park up. Some insurance companies won't allow their drivers to... The vehicle isn't insured if they drive at night. It's very difficult for a lot of the truck drivers, especially if they're carting cattle, because they want to get them off the truck to the market as quickly as possible. You don't want to draw out that experience. So things are changing quite dramatically in the Northern Territory. Truck drivers are now forced to drive in those peak periods, and I think it will have a huge impact. Our roads, the Stewart Highway was built for road trains. It's a beautiful road, but the Lassiter Highway is a lot narrower. It's not built for road trains. There was no concept of heavy transport out there. Of course, a lot of our roads are dirt roads, and they're damaged terribly by trucks. I've seen movement of mining machinery through the Great Central Road. I don't know where these large trucks with huge dozers and things are going, but a freshly graded road can be ruined by a few of these low loaders coming down. So yeah, certainly heavy transport does have a effect on tourism and the roads. And as I said, we get a lot of elderly people, and it can be quite frustrating. Getting stuck behind a convoy of caravans, and when you meet these people at the roadhouses, they're quite elderly people who would probably struggle sometimes driving in their local supermarket, let alone having an overloaded vehicle pulling an overloaded caravan at 80 kilometres an hour. They can be a hazard, and as I said, very frustrating for truck drivers.
Again, Mr. Swindles, thank you so much for coming a considerable distance to meet with the panel and share your views. It has been quite enlightening. You've given us a great deal to think about. And as I said, we will absolutely take on board your suggestion to come down to Yalara and do some investigations and see whether or not we can fit that into our existing timetable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time too.